So the truth of the matter, whoops. Am I on? Can you hear me? So the truth is, I'm not going to wear my glasses because I can't bring up my notes. So we're just gonna go. So I really appreciate everyone coming, and this has been a really a really fascinating topic for me that I've been exploring since before the pandemic, really. And I think that remote work culture, work from anywhere culture, has certainly didn't start with COVID-19, but was absolutely accelerated by it, and became something that was put on the travel manager's radar very quickly and very intensively by the pandemic. So for today, our panel, I love my panel today. We are going to talk about some of the complexities that a work from anywhere or future of work organization will come up against. Some of the solutions or strategies that are formulating now, and maybe if there are some solutions out there that will help us get there, that would be great to talk about as well. But for now, I think let's try to define what the issues are, the problems are, the challenges. Before we do that, I would like for each of my panelists, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself with your name and your title, and also I would like to know how many days you work in the office.
Thanks, Beth. Pre and post.
Yeah,
pre and post pandemic.
Yeah.
So hi everyone, I'm Rachel Tong. I'm Vice President and General Manager at American Express Global Business Travel here in the UK. I currently work in the office about 3 days a week, sometimes 4. Pre-pandemic, I was a serial office goer, so I was in 5 days a week, but that has changed.
And what about you, Clive?
Hi, I'm Clive Fathers. I'm a tax partner at Mazars. Pre-pandemic, I was in the office every day. Now, if my boss is watching, I'm in 2 or 3 days a week. In reality,
Never.
Maybe 3 days or 4 days a fortnight.
Oh, okay, right. So on average, 1.5 to 2 days a week.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it a bit later on, the reasons why. Yeah.
Okay. Anna.
Hello, my name is Anna. I'm with AMS. I'm a global facilities manager. And before the pandemic, I would work from the office 4 days a week, now 1. So, yes, I'm in line with everyone.
You're three quarters
Yes.
Reduced.
Absolutely.
And Lydie, how about you?
So hello everyone, my name is Lydie Charpin. I'm from Citric Solution at Amadeus, so in charge of solution for corporation, vice president. And so before the pandemic, I used to be every day at the office, and now it's 2 to 3 days, so a big change.
And Aurelie, I know you have a different life entirely, so tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi everyone, my name is Aurélie Crow. I'm Head of Customer Success for Hubly. Prior to that, business travel consultancy background. Before the pandemic, 0 day in the office. The world was my office. Post-pandemic, still 0 day at the office.
Aurelie is our digital nomad member of our panel. So you'll give us that perspective from your own life, but also sort of the trend as well that we're going to be talking about. So I actually wanted to ask everyone in the audience the same question, but maybe a little bit, can formulate it a little bit differently. If you could raise your hand if you work in the office 5 days a week. Yeah, couple. How about 1 day a week?
I like the hesitation.
More, okay. How about 2 to 3 days a week? Yeah. So, and raise your hand if this is a change from prior to the pandemic. Yeah, a big change. So for me, I work 0 days at the office now. Maybe I'll go in 1 day every other month. But that was about, I went in about 1 day a week before the pandemic. So another big change, but I think what the message is here is that we're 1/2 to 3/4 down just on our panel alone. So it's a striking change, and one that impacts travel management, but has also sort of broken open travel management in a way to some other opportunities. So we'd like to talk about that. One of the different sources of this panel that I wanted to just use as an example was the new policy of Airbnb, the work from anywhere policy of Airbnb. You listen to CEOs like Jamie Dimon or Elon Musk, and they have been extremely adamant about getting back to the office. I think in the sort of say anything world of the US, Elon Musk was, you'll be fired if you don't come back. And I don't know that that has actually been executed. Jamie Dimon, on the other hand, in late November last year, global company, kind of said the same thing. We're coming back to the office, but by April, he had really changed his tune and basically said, okay, you guys win, because in our current environment with labor shortages, with the war on talent, recruiting and retention, that environment is not playing well to your most talented people who want to work in an environment of trust, who want to be responsible for their own lives and have the flexibility that they need to live their lives. So it's a really interesting time right now where I think employees do really have a lot of power in the workplace, and this is a change that they want to keep. So, okay, one more question for the audience. Raise your hand if you'd like to go back to the office 5 days a week. There.
They're too scared to raise their hands.
No, sorry. If you're too scared to raise your hand, just do it anyway. There's no judgment here. Like, there's an appeal to the office. I don't know if I want to go there 5 days a week, but so let's talk for 1 second about the Airbnb policy, just because it sets an example of kind of, I think, maybe the furthest reach of this policy or this change that I've seen. I think this is a little bit self-interested, because also if every business were to go to this model, I think Airbnb would make even more money than it makes today. But let's just, as a thought exercise, explore what this policy is. So I was reading it this morning. One of the tenets is you may move anywhere you want within your own country, and our pay scales will not be prorated based on your location. It's these are the scales, and no matter where you live within your domestic country, we're not going to change your pay, which has been different for a number of companies that have said, yeah, sure, you can leave San Francisco, but then you're going to get a pay cut of a third or whatever it is. And one of the other policies change has been you may also, as a work from anywhere employee, work anywhere you want, internationally or otherwise, 90 days out of the year, which I think is quite generous, quite provocative to a lot of other CEOs out there. I mean, provocative to employees, and for recruitment and retention purposes would really attract, an interesting talent pool. One of the other policies was, the increase of travel. One of the things that Chesky acknowledged in this sort of statement of the new policy was, we know you're going to be alone. We know that you're going to feel isolated, and the collaboration issue is going to become a challenge. So we are going to implement regular travel to meetings so that you can meet with your team. That's expected. So there's this new type of what I was calling at the very beginning of the pandemic reverse business travel, where you're no longer going out, but you're coming in to meet with your teams, collaborate with your coworkers, and have the water cooler talk, or whatever you want to call that. So the relationship building aspect. So those, I think, are the three aspects that I'd like to talk to our panel about today. And I want to, I think we already demonstrated this, but now, based on that intro that I've given, I'd like to pass it to each of our panelists to say, do you think, because as I said, I think this whole sort of Brian Chesky Airbnb policy is quite designed to benefit Airbnb, but do you think that this is based on a real trend, on a real recruitment and retention issue, on reality? Or is it kind of just, it's designed to benefit, our company? What do you think is happening? Real trend or not quite that?
So I do think it's a real trend. I think you also mentioned recruitment strategies, and something that we're noticing, obviously, for everybody that's based in the UK, is that, you know, the UK workforce on a whole is actually shrinking. People that are closer to retirement age are retiring earlier post-pandemic. Working mothers who are wanting to take part-time roles are leaving businesses for that flexibility. And then we also have the impacts of Brexit. So actually unemployment is at an all-time low. And I think that's something that businesses have to really deal with as we try and attract new talent into our organizations and into the travel industry as well. So I do think this trend and this offer around hybrid working is an absolutely critical part of the employee value proposition, and for any company that's trying to attract talent across the UK. I also noticed on our team here of Amex GBT we had somebody working 5 days a week and somebody working 1 day a week in the office. So I think it also comes down to personal preference, but there's a lot of work companies need to do to actually set the right policies to enable flexibility across the board.
Right. And how that impacts travel, we'll talk about in 1 second. And Clive, what is your opinion on this matter? You have a tax role, and so maybe you've seen some trends even within your own company to, I don't know, validate whether this is even happening or not.
Yeah, I think first of all, my sympathy goes out to the tax department. At Airbnb, when he made that announcement, I'm sure he hadn't consulted with the tax team, because they would have had their head in their hands.
He called it the ground team, and they said this does create complexities for the ground team.
Yeah, it does. It's definitely a trend. I've got lots of clients who are proactively introducing policies, typically between 30 and 60 days. I've not known many go for 90.
Right.
The more time an individual spends in another country, the more likely it is that they're going to trigger some tax considerations for themselves and potentially for the company. And certainly post-COVID, all countries have got a big black hole that they're looking to fill with extra tax revenue. So I think it is a definite trend. When you're talking about evolving policies, I think that would be absolutely essential. And including the tax team and the HR team and the travel team in those, I think is a new dynamic we'll see going forward.
Yeah, thank you. And Anna, at your company, AMS, which used to be called Alexander Mann Solutions.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that everyone is aware of kind of the transformation. Is this something that's happening in your own company?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
However, for us, it's a bit different because AMS has long implemented flexible working conditions for our staff. So what we're currently rolling out, or have actually implemented by now, a hybrid working model, is really an extension of what we were doing before. Since 2015, everybody was issued a laptop as opposed to a PC.
Yeah.
Everybody had a soft phone as opposed to a regular plastic phone on their desk, which supported the opportunities that stem from working flexibly and working from home, working from the office. Although with the pandemic, when we all went into lockdown and the offices were closed, this served to accelerate this process for us, like for many other companies. And right now, we are faced with staff who are not that willing to come back to the office, as clearly demonstrated in the poll that we had between us. But we do believe that there is value to using the office. As much as it's very appealing to promote working entirely flexibly or remotely and the work from anywhere concept, we do believe that there are something happens when people meet. There are synergies and innovation can occur when there's a meeting in progress between individuals. So we are reimagining our workplaces, our offices, so that they support collaboration and innovation and no longer serve as 9 to 5 place of work where you sit at your desk and just do your work. So we are changing the purpose and the role that offices play in our workforce as a continuation of the policies that were implemented even before the pandemic. And it's worked well for us.
Yeah, and I want to point out that with your company and your role, so travel management reports up through facilities at AMS. Is that right?
So yes, absolutely. And for us, under the global facilities umbrella, there are different elements that sit together. It's travel, it's facilities as in offices, it's mobile phones, it's all sorts of commodities and essential tools that allow people to work. And it has been this structured this way for a long time. So for me, it's not a massive change to consider travel as part of work enablers. It's just how we have always viewed it, and it's just now coming into life in a different shape or form. One other thing that I'd like to mention, there are different ways to support hybrid working. It's not just about coming to the office or not. We've rolled out an on-demand workstation solution for our staff, so that people in certain locations can book a desk at a co-working space via an app. And it works great for us. It's been very warmly received because it allows people the opportunity to go out of their homes and into a professional environment, meet people without the threat of their pajamas sticking out from under the bed or something. And at the same time, it does not create a massive cost for the business because we don't need to set up a whole new office in a location where we weren't planning to do that. It's great. It also has meeting room booking capabilities. And we actually work with you guys as well for that in some capacity. So my point is that there are different ways to doing this and different methods to support this model. It's not all out like Airbnb. Right. You can balance it and adjust it to your own corporate culture.
Yeah. And actually I want to just pause for a second because I'd like to ask the audience, do you have, and you can raise your hand to comment or you can just raise your hand, but is anyone also, like Anna here, sourcing, flexible workspace or having that demand on you from your employees and travelers? So one here, flexible workspace, two? Just two out of all of you? I'm very surprised. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Because I do see that as a real point of interest among the buyers that interact with BTN. It's like, well, now I'm not just working with facilities in my local area. I need to work with facilities where we are establishing businesses and we need flexible workspace there. It's not an office anymore. We need to be more agile than that, and we need to have these sort of broader relationships with the providers of those flexible workspaces, whatever, and there's a number of them, and whether it's the WeWork or the Convene or the ETC venues or Regis or whatever it is, and so I do think that is a demand that's coming towards travel that maybe once would have been more of a facilities type of responsibility. So, Lidi, sorry, just a little break in the action there. Can you tell me a little bit about you and your opinion? No, we did the you part. The opinion about whether this is a real trend. I think we've established that it is.
Yeah, so if I can talk about Amadeus, we are in the travel industry, so obviously the face-to-face interaction are very important. But when we had the pandemic, actually in 2 weeks, we shifted from full remote with all the IT, everyone at home. So I think, and then I'll answer more globally, but at Amadeus, we have seen a big change, a shift in a very few days. And I would point out something you said about, the purpose we receive from our HR, department, even some new recommendation to actually go to the office when we don't have meetings. Okay, so actually, when you have meetings and you are, in conference, virtual calls, etc., better stay at home. But actually, to go to the office, the outside in, just to socialize. So to book some time to go to the coffee, etc. So that's a change of mindset, that I'd like to point out. Now, as well, we are working a lot with Microsoft at Amadeus. And actually, we have conducted a lot of studies. And, I think, really broadly speaking, a lot of workers are really willing to continue the hybrid work. Actually, there was a survey in 2021 across 30,000, people, and the majority wants that to continue, and even 50% saying this year that they would consider full remote. So it's something I see in my team. People asking actually to work from anywhere. People that are also thinking of relocation. So they are based, in a country, and then because of all those changes, they say, okay, I want to go in another part of the country or in another country. Would you allow me to do that? So there is, all policies around the work from anywhere. That we implemented like Airbnb, as well as the workation. So we don't have 90 days, but we have 1 month and a half where you go on vacation and then you can continue with business trips. So I think this is really now part of the way we work, the way we socialize. I don't think there will be a way back, to be honest.
I agree.
And I still think there are challenges. So we, I saw, in the team, people saying, okay, we lack of interaction, connection, etc. So part of it can be addressed. I'm sure we will discuss later on with technology. But I think from a leadership perspective, from HR, travel manager, IT, the focus on how do we make, collaboration and interaction alive with less face-to-face. But then when we meet face-to-face, the fact that it's really to build relationship more than to talk about, the business. So it's transforming the way we travel, but also the way we collaborate the rest of the time. So I think we will see a lot of innovation and players in this field to build those connections and making sure that actually the employee network is alive and even in a different shape. And I would conclude, by saying we talk a lot about the great resignation, from people, and probably there is a way now to do a great regeneration with talent management, with those, flexibility, but also ensuring that this network is working properly.
Thank you so much, Lydie. And so we get to our digital nomad among us. So so we've kind of talked about this idea of okay, so we've not left the workplace, but the workplace is a different entity now, and we go there to socialize. We go there because we want to meet up with our colleagues, but only on it's a limited basis, and we can do so much flexibly from home. Arlie has been a wanderer for some time.
That's true.
And so why don't you tell us about that and some of the trends actually around that as well, because it's not just you, it's thousands of others.
No,
Millions.
absolutely. But even, digital nomad it's been around way before the pandemic. Well, now we have a word for that. But if we just, even more, I would say down to earth, it's on the top of digital nomad, it's just about remote work and about location independence. No matter where you are, if you're working from home, if you're working from the cafe across the street, if you're working from abroad. And to build on what you said, Anna, you have the foundations of what we call a digital HQ. By having all of our solutions on the cloud, being able to communicate, having our devices, just within hand reach. So it's the foundation of a completely new way that we work. So I would say it's not even about where do we work, it's about how do we work. And to build upon that, and I just would like to repeat after me, work is not a place. work is not a place. There we go. It's the workplace. So the biggest trend that I see is that now being location independent, it's not only for freelancers anymore. That is the biggest disruption. Of course, tax is one of the immigration policy. It's one of the biggest challenge. Good news, governments are starting to wake up. I mean, even if you look, we're talking digital nomads. Indonesia, Bali, well, we have the expert here, so I won't step on your toes. They just announced a 5-year digital nomad visa tax-free. Yet to be, well, it's the announcement, so now you need to look behind the curtain to see exactly how you're going to apply this. But bottom line is governments start to try to facilitate this. So now as a travel manager, mobility manager, real estate, what we are seeing, and we'll talk about that in phase 2, but we're starting to talk to many more departments than what we used to think in terms of scope. Also in terms of talent attraction, if you have like 30 minutes, just take a look at some job offers. There are some companies, even like in the midst of the pandemic, I'm thinking about Shopify. They just said we are digital by default, digital by design. They were the first ones to announce we're closing off our offices, and now we're allowing our employees to work from anywhere 90 days per year. Their Wise, for example, as well, TransferWise, their company culture is like, we want to make money borderless, and we want our own company to be borderless. So it's also about the company values and how does that translate in our travel and meetings policy. It's always been the case with travel management. We've always talked about how my travel program has to reflect my company culture. But now I would say the way that we look at it is different. And to your initial, as I said many things, the initial question was my take on digital nomads and that. Yeah. So I think this trend is here it's always been here. I've been a huge leisure advocate as well before the pandemic, and what you've described, workations, leisure, whatever words we put against that. Maybe I think it's also the new definition, well, of the workplace, but also of a trip. Is it a leisure trip? Is it a business trip? I'm meeting my team, what's the purpose? Maybe it's time that we look at this and we think about what are my suppliers, how do I source my services, what products do I need, how can I maybe change my perspective on that. Look at even the industry, like Accor Hotels has a co-work brand. They are going into that space as well with real estate, with Wojo. There's tons of things happening in the industry, and the patterns are going to change as well. Why do we meet? We have the sustainability topic that is one of the biggest priorities in our industry. If I need to fly on a trip, I'm going to make the most out of it. So what are my policies? So yeah, this is a very long answer to the initial questions, but a couple of things I wanted to touch.
No, I think that's perfect, and it serves as a really nice segue into the next segment of this conversation, which is really how are these changes then impacting travel? Do we need, and what do we need to start looking at? So I mentioned earlier, how many of you are looking at different types of facilities and venues and co-working space, but as you bring up, there are other aspects of this. It's not just that one type of supplier, it's policy. It's if you're going on this where does a work trip begin and end, and how do you start to wrap policy around that? So I wanted to actually take this to Rachel. I'm not going in order on purpose, but this is just the natural sort of way this is playing out. But I do want to go to Rachel and talk a little bit broadly, because as Amex GBT, you have a number of clients, if I may call a number of clients. And so if you could give us kind of the broader perspective of what are the trends on some of your most progressive clients who maybe have implemented some of these, broad changes? And then how are they starting to see that cascade down into their travel program? I mean, I'm aware of Salesforce. I'm aware of some of these sort of really big names that are making big changes. What are the trends you're seeing with that client base?
So Salesforce, they're obviously a very digitally focused organization and one of our key clients. And over the course of the pandemic, so even before this whole return to travel, they had already started using digital tools to bring their employees together from an engagement perspective, which really allows for that remote working to take place, whilst also facilitated by technology. So that was a very important part of their travel program. But it isn't a replacement for face-to-face meetings. I think that was something I was reflecting on as everyone was kind of giving their answer, is that even though this remote working is going on and it's a trend and it's here to stay, it actually makes the travel component of that trend even more important, because travel is essentially one of the only ways in which you can get people face-to-face together and you can actually develop your company culture. I think there's only so much you can do on technology, and something our CEO Paul Abbott says quite often is, you don't lose a sale twice over Zoom. So I think, that face-to-face connection and those relationships that we build across our organizations are absolutely critical. We're also seeing with some of our clients them take a stance on their travel policies, so saying, okay, we are going to travel half as much, but we're going to make the trips longer, we're going to make them more robust, we're going to fit in quite a few meetings as opposed to flying over to Hong Kong for just a couple of nights and flying back. So it becomes more of a gathering and series of events, and actually that's the way we've seen business come back this year, is really through events, but not external industry events, although those are obviously happening as well, and we're at one now. But actually a lot of companies are bringing it back through small internal engagements, and that's something we're seeing more and more of, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, Aurelie, you could back that up with maybe a bit of a trend line, because that's what your new company, when did you join Hubly? Because it's only been 3 months, 4?
Yeah, 3 months.
The trend line, I think, just the bookings on the Hubly platform,
Yes.
which really is very strong with that smaller, more intimate meeting. I just talked to your boss yesterday. So and the trend line is really up.
I have a couple of trends to share. So basically we're seeing 3 major trends. The first one that we're seeing through our platform is the rise of small meetings. So pre-pandemic, the average attendee were 83. Now the average attendee size, it's 24. So it's more start small, get teams to get together, to meet. It started actually as well with group stays. Post-pandemic, where we were just out of the chaos, it was more about, we're going to travel to the office, we're going to get our teams to meet up, and so on our platform what we saw were group accommodation only. So no meeting space because they were gathering in the office, but group accommodation. And actually we saw a 71% increase in group stays only, post versus pre-pandemic. And the third one that we're seeing, to build on what basically everyone said, it's offsites. Company offsites, to bring the teams together, to build culture, to build relationship. And so what we have, like the requests that we are seeing of 2+ day residential meetings, they were up 180%. So it's quite huge. And also, exactly to echo what everyone said, it's I've actually interviewed recently, and if you're interested in this, there's a fantastic community of remote workers or companies that are remote first, and new functions like head of remote. We're going to talk about that, but these are new functions that we're seeing more and more cross departments. And there are conferences, events, dedicated events where people go and talk about how they adjust their policies, all those things. Their recommendations for offsites and team gatherings, it's like around 40-50% of the time you let people do whatever they want. so they can explore the destination,
Okay.
pure leisure. 30% group activities, team building, whatever you would like to organize for the teams, and only 20% pure work. And they actually found out that this, you bond with your colleagues. And so when you're back in that dispersed environment where everybody works from different places, it's easier. The collaboration sparks more easily. So it's just, if you're interested in this, maybe just take a look at those communities out there, because it's very inspiring to bring this back to our industry and try to see how we can adapt this.
Right. And actually, I want to go to Anna for a second, because I think this brings up an interesting idea, and I don't know if this is reflected in your company or not, but let's give it a try. The idea that transient travel management and meetings management maybe move closer together in this environment. And I don't know if that's something that may be happening at your company, or if you already managed those two things together. Can you comment on that at all? And you can just
we're
say
definitely
no if it's
no.
not happening.
We're definitely seeing a change,
Mhm.
and we are working to provide a solution for these sort of meetings. Before the pandemic, it was to each their own, so to speak. So teams would manage their own requirements. They would coordinate between themselves with potential support from admin teams.
Right.
However, right now, I'm seeing an increased expectation to get some in-house support with these requirements, because if you have a one-off, to begin with, a one-off type of meeting of 60 people coming together, they need support with coordinating that. We have excellent travel booking tools, but still 60 people, or however many I said, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And everybody has different requirements. Someone arrives on Monday, someone on Tuesday, etc. This needs to be managed. So we are looking at ways in which we can support with these, and I think this is something that will definitely need to be solved for. And I think this will be again our function within the business doing this. So to summarize my lengthy response, I'm seeing a change. I think it will happen, yes.
Okay, and thank you. I appreciate that. I want to pan out to the audience again. Then, how many of you were looking at managing small meetings prior to the pandemic? One. And how many of you are looking to manage or provide a platform for smaller meetings now that we are so-called post-pandemic? Okay, well, double. Quadruple.
I was thinking that as well. 3 times.
Quadruple. So, I mean, I do think that, I mean, I don't know how many of you are, buyers in the room. I know we have buyers and suppliers among us today. But I do think that's indicative of this change. I think the smaller meetings and the smaller meetings platforms like Hubly, like Troop, like a number of others. What's the other one I'm thinking of? I can't think of it.
Beth, I wonder whether the reason there weren't more hands going up is because people are organising them themselves. And I'm not sure that's the best way to do it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But
Because
certainly-
we need the data. We need that
Yeah.
intelligence, because that's where you come in, right? Especially if we're going to have these repeat meetings, potentially away from home, whether it's a municipality, whether it's a country, whether it's whatever, and we have groups of people moving around. So let's just go back to Airbnb for 1 second, because that's my sort of proxy for this new world. If every quarter you go to meet your team and you stay literally, and it says in this sort of, I don't know what you call it, statement, that we're going to stay longer, we're going to stay for a week, we're going to stay for 10 days with your team, so plan to do that every quarter. If you're doing that, that means you're a month in potentially the same destination. That's a tax liability. That's a potential tax liability, and that's a group that may not be the same group every time, but will have a core of similar people in a similar destination 4 times a year. I think that becomes a tax liability.
Yeah, and the thing that people often overlook is that, let's say you went to the same country for 4 sessions a year and each one was 10 days,
Right.
to 40 days already. They may have forgotten that actually they were in that country earlier in the year on holiday or visiting relatives, and
Right.
I think it's going to be really essential that as the travel patterns change and what people would just naturally, if I'm going to Manchester for a couple of days, I'll just go and buy myself a ticket and get myself up there.
Mhm.
But I think in this new world, if that's going to happen more often, then it's absolutely essential that you've got a central way of tracking that
Correct.
to avoid the challenges down the road.
Correct. And so that's where these platforms like the meetings platforms start to come into play. Even if they're self-serve, at least you get the data on the back end so that that can be fed into some kind of system of checks and balances, either with your security team or with your compliance team, or let's hope in the booking tool, so that when the booking traveler says, well, I want to go to this place, it pops up and says, wait, you've been there for 20 days already this year. You better check on this. Yeah.
Yeah, but with the privacy, how could a company ask their employees where they spend their holidays, for example? I mean, I work at the European Investment Bank, and privacy is a huge
Yeah.
issue. So to actually ask someone, did you go to this country during this year, that would be difficult.
I think it's a really good question, and you need to be very careful how you worded it. But actually, if there was some kind, if it's a portal type system where you can protect people's confidentiality, they can put their details in anonymously and be alerted personally if they're about to trigger any potential filing issues, and then they would need to go to whoever they need to internally. I think that's a fantastic point.
I think that's a really good point. And I actually, when you said holiday, that kind of triggered a similar thought in my mind. A little bit of a different angle, which was for a visa situation, it seemed like the holiday would be important. For a tax situation, if they're not working in that destination, does it still sort of
Yeah, it can do, because
allocate?
the UK is a good example. Depending on whether you're in the UK for 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, or up to 180, that will create different filing requirements for your company in the UK, and different information they need to provide to the revenue. And if they can't demonstrate to the tax authorities that they've got the right procedures in place, then that can be a great excuse for the tax man or woman to come in and start looking at things in a bit more detail. And even if they don't find anything, anyone who's been involved in a revenue inquiry will know it just eats weeks, if not months of time, which you'd sooner be using for something else.
Right.
I think this is quite interesting, though, because we're talking about meetings and events, and we're talking about travel, and they're managed in a lot of cases quite separately.
Yes.
But actually, we're talking to, obviously, Clive, you're a tax expert, and so it's, these key stakeholders across our organisations, which has almost elevated the role of the travel manager or the meetings and events manager, which means you're basically having to manage the same stakeholders internally, whether that's your chief people officer, whether that's your chief financial officer, and so bringing that, an ESG officer as well. So bringing all of that together is actually just going to create a lot of efficiency and a lot of synergies around data sharing and duty of care and everything like that. So it's important.
And even speaking of stakeholders, mobility management as well is coming around the table. And what we see is some of my main contacts with our clients are from real estate. Because some companies have actually decided to shut down offices or reduce the size of their office, or intentionally decide not to extend the size of their office. I was actually talking to a prospect last week. They got lucky in terms of timing. During the crisis, 50% of their real estate lease had to expire. So they decided not to reconduct. And right now, within 3 months, they have the potential to have 4,000 employees going fully remote. So it's like an emergency situation where they're actually trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? Do we want to take another lease? Do we offer an on-demand platform? And so they're in the process of discussing. What we've seen as well is sometimes when it's a one-off, we're going to talk to travel or meetings or procurement. If it's something more midterm or if there's a pattern, real estate comes and mobility management comes around the table as well.
Yeah.
I was just going to come to you.
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on that because I think your point about, who we talk to, I think the question of travel, and you mentioned that, the boundaries with meeting is merging, and we have like, travel managers that needs to think really strategically how actually travel fits into the overall, business objective of a corporation and talent retention and all of that we mentioned. And then what you say about, the Oubli platform and to plan meetings, I think the boundaries between the collaborative tools, the travel and expense tools, they are converging.
True.
And I was thinking that, for the smaller meetings, actually, the Zoom or Microsoft or all of those players, they offer every day. Yeah? We have a virtual meeting, and when do we decide actually to meet face-to-face? I think it's one of the key challenge at the moment of defining the corporate program, but also at the moment of using IT and technology to think about, okay, why right now it's a moment actually to meet with the team or to meet customers. And we are thinking, that enabling the smart connection and actually prompting people, your close team or your customers to say, okay, now it's the right moment to connect. And then the connection can be face-to-face or virtual. And that requires a lot of thinking. So today we do it, we think ourselves. We call people, we send emails, etc. But you could actually have technology to evaluate, the strengths of a network. So if we think about, all the chat functionality or Outlook, in your close network or including with LinkedIn with customers, measuring, how often do you interact, and then if it's getting weaker, actually to prompt and say, okay, by the way, you have not connected with this person, this client, your team for quite a long time. So this is not actually completely new. We have solutions and initiatives of Viva, for instance, from Microsoft. But I think we will see that popping up, even in the role, of the travel manager and HR and IT, to combine all those dimensions and to say, okay, we need a corporate program, but that's very aligned with the actually the collaborative tool and the meeting tool, to merge it all together and to agree on the strategy, to define, okay, when does it make sense actually to meet. And we have a lot of thoughts about how to measure actually the value of a trip. So I'm giving just a few examples. How do you make sure that when you then meet your team, you mentioned, it's off-site, it's not about business meeting, but how many people did you meet? How many customer in what trip did you, maximize the value of interaction?
The good old ROI.
Exactly. So how do we measure that? So there are certainly, challenge, and I'm sure, we will be brainstorming on how to measure it. But I think it's an essential dimension when we talk to our travel manager, our client. It's what they want in the end. It's to say, okay, we are here to support, the business of the company, and how do we measure the value of the corporate program? And today it has been based on, the cost of the trip, carbon footprint, etc. But we need to add the other dimension, which is about the business growth, talent retention, etc., and how we get this information.
And what I'm just sort of thinking in my head as you're talking is that this sort of comes together with client relationship management software, but then also client relationship management software also at this moment also can wrap in the employee management piece, because it's that same relationship building, it's that same loyalty you want from the employee, it's that same connection you want to have with that employee who is working for the company, and to have that relationship. So very, very interesting thoughts. And I was actually just about to come to you on the panel to ask, what are your clients looking for? So that was a really, that was a much more progressive answer than I was going for, than I was really asking. I was going to ask how that sort of travel and meetings piece was coming together potentially in the booking tool, or maybe a little bit more pedestrian question than you answered. Do you see Amadeus clients and Citric clients bringing those two sides of their programs together in a more meaningful way to gather that data and to understand it?
Yeah, so I think that there is a point of, integrating the data between the HR system, IT system, all of that we set. So, for instance, to work very closely with platform like Workday or, Microsoft, all those data, because those are employee experience as well as collaboration tools. So my answer is, what we hear from our client, our corporation, is how we build the bridge between the employee retention, the meetings, collaboration, and the value of the travel program. Then we are also having a lot of requests from customers linked to compliance.
Yeah.
So obviously in the booking tool, the user, the travelers, they expect to do a booking, but as well to know all the regulation they have to comply and about the visa. So obviously we have been we are working for our clients with global providers like PricewaterhouseCoopers or KPMG to do that integrated in the booking tool. So that means when you want to travel in a place, to have the possibility to get a pre-travel real-time assessment about everything that needs to be checked, and then the downstream processes, because we are also for the expense. And you mentioned UK. In Germany, it's a very complex market as well. And in Germany, you pay, tax income as well, depending on the number of days where you are abroad. So all of that has to be like an end-to-end solution. So what we hear from our both TMC client and corporation is the need for an end-to-end solution when travel is involved, but as well when travel is not involved directly, how we integrate those solutions with the HR system, with Salesforce, Workday, and the collaborative tool like Microsoft or Google.
Yeah, so that the systems operate in an integrated way, just like the travel managers are starting to operate in that integrated way, so everyone can share the information as a universe of information that we can really draw conclusions from. All right, so we have only 5 minutes left of this session. I want to open up to our audience if there are any questions. And if you don't have questions for our panel, I always have more questions, so I can do that. Yes.
So my question's for everyone, but particularly orally, because I saw Hubly just released a new sustainability module.
Yeah.
So especially in Europe, when you have the ESG reporting, sustainable financial disclosure, regulation, remote work, remote meetings adds an additional layer of complexity for corporations to collect that sustainability data that they need to accurately apply these laws. So how do you actually provide data on a property level to say, okay, so meeting room A creates 5 kilograms of CO2, meeting room B makes 10 kilograms of CO2. Like, how do we get this information to corporations?
Short answer, I don't know. A longer answer. So we launched that module. We had to start somewhere, and we actually conducting an exercise. We interviewed around 10 corporate buyers and meetings managers to understand a little bit where they were themselves with this journey. So we started with a decision guide, if you will, because I think it's actually twofold, the answer. First one is actually, where do we meet? If you think about an international meeting, and if you want to gather, let's say, a little bit more than the average we see now, if we're going back to pre-COVID levels of 80-ish people from different countries, we want to make this easier, as in, I have 10 people flying out of the UK, I have 20 people flying from New York, I have 20 people on a train. And so we're aiming at providing the lowest carbon emission, like the most carbon effective meeting location, like in terms of destination. Now, in terms of venue, this is from probably everyone would agree, this is one of the biggest pain points because there is currently no standard. So we started by making the choice to at least offer each venue to tell us whether they have whatever sustainability accreditation, whether it's LEED, BREEAM, Green Key, so at least to start with this. Next level, we're trying to understand what are the criteria, like when you want to source a meeting, what are the questions that organizers ask when it comes to sustainability? And it's exactly to your point. One of our clients I spoke to, they were actually trying to calculate exactly what's the emission per participant based on the exact venue. But they even needed to know, for example, the glass window, is it like double layer, one layer? What's the exact electricity consumption? And we don't have this data yet, but it's on everybody's mind, and we're trying to build a solution around that, providing venues themselves know and have a way to measure this data.
And that's really hard because every venue, whether it's an independent property, whether it's a boutique, the structure of the venue industry, the hotel industry is such that you can have a brand promise here, but whether that's delivered at the property level is a completely different story. And I think it's a very difficult prospect ahead of us for that. Do you have an answer for this question?
Maybe just a comment, because it's indeed very difficult to measure. I think we have to start by somewhere, as you said.
Yeah.
And obviously, the choice of taking an aircraft or rail, I think on that, we can be confident that there are solutions to measure, at least to compare, okay? And to try to push, we talked about the policy. It's quite easy to implement policy where you would favor, like some government in France and in the UK, if you have less than 2 hours, you cannot take a plane, for instance, and that can be really put into the IT tools to enforce that. So at least on that front, we can't measure everything, but to start with,
to make informed choices and track this as this, we are able to do the travel parts. I think we're halfway there. Even though we could do a better job, but it's already quite not too bad. The meetings part is one of the biggest challenges when I speak to everyone and to your peers, and I think this is where, as an industry, we have some work to do a better job.
Are there other questions for our panel? Tax, it's your time. It's your time.
Who takes questions?
I'm sorry.
I have a question for you, Clive, after that.
You said earlier that you started to change the way the office looks to make it more a place of collaboration rather than a place where you have to sit from 9 to 5. What sort of changes have you implemented?
We have a structured strategy to bring people back, centered around communication, underscoring the benefits of coming to the office to collaborate. We have a calendar of events at all of our major offices to bring people together, and it's all sorts of things like lunch and learn initiatives, Thirsty Thursdays at some,
Nice.
mostly centered around food. Those initiatives are. There's nothing incites people to come to the office like food does, but also we work with our leadership they would visit our offices anyway. So we make sure that when they do, their agenda includes meetings with colleagues who are based in a specific location, that there is an opportunity to speak to them, to meet the leadership team. Also, we work with them to help them coordinate their calendars between themselves. We work with their EAs, so that either they coordinate their visits so they are not all week after week. If they are coming, let them come on the same week and meet. Or the other way around, let them come the meetings be more spaced. So there are different things that we do. We also, of course, we started with a survey. We asked our colleagues what they expected, what they wanted, and we learned, like we all did in this session, that they wanted to use the office on their own terms, not as a standard place of work, but as a collaboration space. And in terms of office layout, we have good breakout spots in the office, soft seating areas. We have, again, cafeteria style of locations within the office. We make sure that we are able to offer that.
Yeah.
Just to
Go ahead.
I was just gonna add to that, because we have actually done something quite similar. It was actually done pre-pandemic, but it's worked really well post-pandemic as well. But we essentially shifted our office so it was it's become activity-based working format. So everything is a hot desk.
Yeah.
None of our VPs or executives have offices. That includes our CEO. Anyone can book a meeting room. And there are lots of collaboration zones, and I think that is the way forward, particularly with the remote workforce coming together to use
But I
meeting
think also
rooms.
the hospitality aspect of the
Yeah.
office
Yeah,
is
exactly.
becoming a thing. It's almost like hotels are doing much the same
Yeah.
with bringing in locals to the lobby, to the sort of social areas. I think offices will be doing some similar things.
And
We are so out of time, and I don't want to keep
We
everyone
are.
here. I wish we could talk about this for much, much longer. I want to have Orly ask Clive her tax question.
Clive, I have a question for you.
Ollie, I don't have a letter of engagement, I'm afraid, so fire away.
No, because even pre-COVID,
Yep.
well, I it was a bit easier because I was self-employed, so I didn't have that issue. But pretty much the questions I always get, but it's easy for you. You don't need to comply with all those taxes and everything. So my question for you is, with people you work with, is tax I would say the biggest the biggest constraint into not being able to, well, let me rephrase. Do you see a will to provide flexible options, but tax gets in the way? Would you say you agree or disagree?
That is actually a really good question. I'm so glad you asked me.
You're
So-
welcome.
So a couple of examples. One with a company that had huge growth aspirations, and they came to us and said, "Look, post-pandemic, we just need the best people, so we're going to open up a global talent pool." So they were interviewing and hiring people in countries that they didn't have any presence in.
Okay.
So what they needed to be aware of as they were doing that was that there is a cost that comes with it. But if you're getting the right people, it's probably worth the cost. But it does mean that you need to be aware of having to set up some kind of local entity and some local payrolls potentially. So I think the most informed companies are actually saying it's a global talent pool now. How do we get the return on investment, I guess, of having a local presence and getting the best people for the roles, regardless of where they are? The other example is really interesting. It's a small tech startup, and we were approached by the third co-founder, who was UK resident, and he said, I said, well, where are the other two? And they said, well, they're based in Portugal for tax reasons. So I've got to stay in the UK because we need someone in the UK, which actually worked well for his personal situation. I think it's really important for businesses to be aware of the fact that the individuals are clever, and there's a lot of information on Google, so they will research the best location for them to be, and it's really important to balance that with what's needed for the business, because actually the third co-founder is in the UK for personal reasons, and all of the tech talent pool they want to dip into is based in England. So being in Portugal actually might give a better tax rate for the individuals, but it's going to hamper them in terms of the ability to grow their business. So it's really interesting how mindsets are shifting on tax.
Our time is up. We're 6 minutes over. I'm so happy that you were all here to listen to our panel. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. Thank you to the panel. I would just want to say that 3 of our 5 panelists were sourced I don't know, 2 days ago, because we had so many replacements because of COVID and family emergencies, and so we cobbled this together. But I knew everyone on the panel was going to be fantastic. So please give them a great hand of applause.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you. Thank you so much, and I hope you're having a wonderful business travel show.
Thank you.
Thank you.